Welcome back. Today we are talking about a phenomenal novel. I'm very pleased to be talking about this incredible book, which I recommend wholeheartedly. It's the novel that won the Booker Prize in 2021, which is a very prestigious British literary award. And it went this year to this South African novel called The Promise by Damon Galgut. Now, I'm totally embarrassed and ashamed to say that I'd never heard of this author before this award was given, let alone read any of his books. So obviously I have a lot of catching up to do because this is a truly phenomenal novel. And it's phenomenal in the sense that it met or even exceeded the expectations of receiving the Booker Prize and all the amazing reviews that I read about it. And I thought there's no way this book is going to even come close to fulfilling all these massive expectations, and fulfill them it did. It's really a totally amazing book. It's the story of a white South African family. It's a family history spanning many years and decades in this family's history. And of course, through this family, we see the evolution in South African history over that same period. The first thing to note is the structure of the book, and it's structured in a very basic but very efficient way, which is that it is structured in 4 funerals. There are no weddings in this, just 4 funerals of characters that are in this novel, family members of this family called the Swarts, which is ironic because Swart in Afrikaans means black. So of course there's that play on the white and black societies of South Africa. The novel starts at the end of the 1980s, before apartheid has ended, apartheid being the state-sponsored racist system of segregation that was the dominant regime of South Africa for decades, and which came undone after Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990 and elected president in 1994. But so before those momentous events, South Africa was very much a segregated state along ethnic groups. And so the book starts before apartheid has come undone, and it evolves as there are momentous changes in South African society, changes that impact, of course, this family, and changes that impact the dynamics of the relationships between the characters. Let's talk about the title for a second, because the title is very interesting in how it presents the various layers of the novel. The word a promise seems pretty obvious. We all know what a promise is, but there's another dimension here, which is, of course, the word promise in terms of potential, that somebody shows a certain amount of promise. And so the promise operates at various levels in this book. First of all, there's a promise that is made at the beginning of the novel by one character to another character. Now that promise, given the context of South African society, is more or less difficult to put in place, but as the novel evolves, the fact that the promise has not been enacted really is due to personal flaws in the various characters. But there's also the word of the promise of certain characters that is met or not met, what they felt that their life was promised to become. There's a sense of promise in terms of entitlement, which was very much prevalent in white South African society for the decades of apartheid. And of course, that entitlement collapsed with the end of apartheid. There's promise in the sense of the promise of a new country once South Africa had ended apartheid, and has that promise been met, and what were some of the positive outcomes and some of the more negative disillusions of that history. And then, of course, there's the ultimate promise for all of us, which is the promise of death. And that is constantly, recursively shown here in the structure of the book, in the fact that there are 4 funerals, and so we all know that we're going to die, and all the characters, or all the major characters, do end up dying. I don't want to give anything away, but it's very interesting to see how that's all done. So the other thing that I found absolutely phenomenal in this was the narrative point of view of the novel, which just skips all over the place, and it goes from different pronouns like he and you and I, and it just zigs and zags. It flows in these crazy directions, and midway through a certain scene, you can be transported to a completely different scene with a completely different character in a completely different place, completely different point of view, and it works. It's not at all confusing. It's not at all disorienting. It absolutely works. And I want to take an opportunity here to compare and contrast that with another novel that I reviewed this year, strangely enough, by another South African novelist, Nadine Gordimer. And that novel was called The Conservationist. And in my review of that novel earlier this year, I complained a lot about that exact same thing, that the action just kept flitting all over the place, and it was impossible to understand where and how what was going on, and so on. And the author, Nadine Gordimer, had made it extremely difficult to understand, hey, what's going on here? Who's talking? What's the point of view? And Damon Galgut in this novel shows exactly how this sort of transposition, this sort of teleportation almost, how it should be done correctly, and how you can do it in a way that really keeps the reader engrossed. And I really appreciated this fine craft of just skipping along in different narrative viewpoints. And it gives an impression of a certain distance between the author and the characters in a way that makes him a bit of a manipulative puppeteer in the best sense of the word, because he really does this best when he's dealing with characters that are not necessarily sympathetic. There are many of those in the book, and by not necessarily sympathetic characters, I'm talking about the older generations of South Africans who were the most entitled under the apartheid system. And so he really takes a lot of pleasure in seeing those characters from a certain distance and inviting the reader to look at them from different points of view, and seeing them in all their nefarious glory. It's really very well done, and also quite humoristic. And so I really enjoyed this sort of narrative play between the different characters. So overall, this is a really fabulous book, and it really keeps you enthralled the whole time. You really want to know what happens. If I had one slight point of view, is that the most of the characters are either very literally black and white, good and evil, and only the 2 characters at the heart of the novel, and I'm not going to reveal which ones they are, but the 2 characters at the heart of the novel seem to have shades of gray within them, and actually one of those 2 characters is definitely more on the right side of things. I thought the most interesting character was the one character that had the most shades of gray within them, and their history, how it evolved, was, I thought, the heart of it. And it's the one character that doesn't meet any of the promises of the novel, and doesn't connect to any of those earlier promises, and so it's that's the most interesting character for me. So I really loved it. I really recommend it. I'd love to hear from any of you who have read this novel by this author, or other novels by him. I'd love to know which of his other novels or plays are the most interesting for any of you. And I'd love to hear from any of you who liked the Nadine Gordimer novel, The Conservationist, because I really disliked it, but I know that many of you loved it as an example of modernist fiction. So I'd love to get that debate going on sort of South African literature and what are some of the highlights there that some of you have enjoyed or not. And also, please, I'm trying to get this YouTube channel going, so please subscribe to it. Send me your comments. Any engagement is always a pleasure for me to respond to. Thanks a lot. Bye.